Hey team, great to see you here at the top of week 2. I am here as usual to deliver you some tips for success as you go forward this week. Here in week 2, I have a lot on my agenda. There's a lot of things that I wanted to discuss this week. I wanted to start by talking about the importance of articulating the stakes of some uncomfortable deliverables for students, such as group work and wikis. So I want to talk about how to do that and why you want to do that as we roll into week 2. I also wanted to talk about some tips for getting to know your students and to develop community and really foster community in these early weeks. It's so important to do that. I also wanted to touch on what SNHU expects from instructors in the discussion forums and how to use quantitative as well as qualitative feedback in the gradebook. So 4 really large scale issues today that I wanted to touch on. So let's get right to it. First of all, I want to talk about those of you who have deliverables in your courses that may make students feel uncomfortable. These deliverables tend to be those that involve group work or those that involve technology in kind of new or interesting ways. So work like peer review, wikis, collaborative projects, group work, anything like that. It's very important that in the first weeks of the class, if you have an assignment like this, that you start to scaffold for students what the function is of these deliverables. Particularly group work and wikis, students tend to be extremely resistant to this kind of work. First of all, they're not familiar with it. Secondly, they don't understand why they're being asked to do it. It seems kind of like busy work or it seems unnecessary. And oftentimes you'll see that student performance in those kind of deliverables will not meet your expectations. This happens to me all the time with workshop deliverables. Students, they don't get it. They don't really understand the stakes. So in the beginning of the class, take the time to outline why these deliverables matter. And how they're helping students to build essential skills, and also give them some tips on how to do them. For a lot of students, a deliverable like a wiki, for example, is completely foreign. They have no idea how they're supposed to interact. And no matter how many resources you give them, they can have a lot of anxiety surrounding that deliverable. So if you address that head on, students are going to be more open to it, and they're going to start to think for themselves about what these deliverables mean. I like to acknowledge what deliverables like this mean for their personal growth, also for their scholastic growth, also for how it contributes right now in our field in academia. Where do we see people collaborating? Where do we see this happening? And why is it important that we practice this to go on to be Ph.D. candidates or to go on to be professors? So thinking about those stakes can really foster good results, better results from your students. Some tips to get to know your students and develop community. Well, here in week 2, it's really, really important that you snag the opportunity to start to develop a community. There are lots of ways that you can do this. Using your announcements smartly is one way, including images and humor and giving them your personality, bits of your personality in some way can help. Encouraging students to use video, if you use video, can be really helpful. I use video, and my students oftentimes will experiment with video, and it develops a great community for them where they can talk back and forth to each other. I've seen some instructors schedule like online meetings through Skype or Hangouts or um, what's that other one that they use? I think it's called UbuWeb, where they get together and they have a big party conference to discuss large scale ideas. That's a great way to build community. But in simpler ways, you can start multiple forums. Have a student chat lounge. Have a forum that you dedicate to some large scale discussion or large scale ideas. Start to demonstrate through your feedback in the discussion forum how students are supposed to reply to each other, how they're supposed to participate, and really get involved. So those are some ways to foster the development of community here in the first couple weeks of the class. Next, I want to talk about SNHU's expectations for your participation in the discussion forum. Now, the discussion forum is not a place to evaluate work. That's one mistake that I see a lot of instructors making. It's not a place where you evaluate work. That's not the function of the discussion forum. That's the function of the gradebook. The discussion forum is a place where you want to make critical observations and, more importantly, pose critical questions that are going to get students to think differently, more creatively, to reimagine and reconsider their perspectives. You want to contribute to discussion in a way that moves discussion forward in a way that you feel it needs to move in order for students to reap the benefit of unpacking some of that heavy material. So you might hone in, for example, on 1 or 2 points from the thread and really kind of disambiguate it, break it down, make it more complex, whatever you need to do to move the discussion in a more critical path, helping students to get toward an idea that could be worthy of an academic essay. That's your role in the discussion forum. Now, I love to see instructors posing questions. For me, questioning is the function of our responses. However, questioning doesn't have to always be in the form of a question. Sometimes questions can be suggested through critical observations and comments. But you want to have that questioning nature to your discussion. What you don't want to do is write a post like nice job, Jimmy. I see what you're saying. I can relate to that. That would be a kind of response that a student might give. We want to display that we want more from students than just to have a casual response. We want engaged responses that are really pulling students to reconsider their perspective. I like instructors that push students to disagree, to find tension in the observations that they make. I like instructors who make students feel incredibly uncomfortable about their ideas and push them to consider stakes. So think about making responses that really matter for the discussion, rather than just making it an observer or a spectator's observation. So those are the expectations from me coming from SNHU as well. The final thing I want to talk about today is using qualitative as well as quantitative feedback in the gradebook. Eventually, SNHU is going to be automatically having embedded rubrics in your deliverables. So you won't have to go through that time-consuming process before your classes start of creating your own rubric and adding it to every deliverable. It can be very time-consuming. I think it's very important to do this. If you go into edit your deliverables, you'll notice that there's a button where it says add rubric. You can create a rubric based on the rubric for that deliverable, and you can use it for every one of those deliverables. It allows you to quickly show students the quantitative value of your feedback, and you can finish it off with an end comment. Now, your end comment should be evaluative. So in other words, the kind of comments that you put in the gradebook should not be the same kind of comment that you put in the discussion board forum. The discussion forum is for propelling ideas. The gradebook is not really going to start posing questions for students to consider or talk about the content of their post necessarily with the aim of getting them to rethink. The gradebook comment should be strictly evaluative. It should be showing students how they have performed, what they've done well, what they can do better, and how. So think about crafting your gradebook comment in two ways: giving them a numerical quantitative value, a breakdown of the rubric. Even if you're not embedding rubrics, you can give them a numerical breakdown, and also a summative evaluation where they get the sense of where they've done well and where they need improvement with details and specifics. So that's what I want you to think about as you go forward in week 2 and you start grading your first deliverables. Please feel free to reach out to me if you have any questions. I would love to talk more about any of these topics, and you can also start a thread in our discussion forum. Hope you guys have a great week, and I will see you here next week. Bye for now.